Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Final Trade. I had this question from one of my patrons, Chris Tuckwell. He asked a couple months back, at some point after Brothers War, can you please do two graph comparisons? The first graph for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, Streets of New Capenna, and Baldur's Gate, and the second graph for Double Masters, Dominaria United, and Brothers War. And he says, my hunch is that the meat in the set sandwich, in other words, Streets and Dominaria United, don't get enough space to breathe and find their feet. And so here's what we have. I've put up here the sales data through 150 days post-release for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, Streets of New Capenna, and Baldur's Gate. And so Chris Tuckwell's theory here is that if you have too many sets releasing too quickly without enough break, without enough time for players to absorb the set, to enjoy it, to figure out the meta, to interact with it, and to feel like they've really kind of, I don't want to say exhausted it, but at least gotten something from it, then the middle set will kind of suffer. And so, it seems like a good theory just on its face, because if you're releasing products too fast, people just don't have time to enjoy them. And so, what do we see here? The blue line of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, the yellow line of Baldur's Gate, and then below both of those, the red lines of Streets of New Capenna. And we see this relationship here on the cumulative box sales and the cumulative spend. And so we do see that the meat in this set sandwich of these three sets is worse performing. And so we'll throw up here Double Masters 2022 and Dominaria United and Brothers War, and we'll plot this. Now, keep in mind we don't have all the data here yet, but it is interesting to see what we have so far. And so, of course, Double Masters 2022 blows everything out of the water, but Dominaria United and Brothers War, both being standard sets, coming out a mere 2 months apart from each other, had very similar performance. And I don't think this disproves the idea. And so what we need to talk about here is how you can have all kinds of other effects that impact this, because what went on with Dominaria United that was pretty unique? Well, the Lost Legends cards and players deciding that they would happily spend hundreds of extra dollars on things like collector boxes in order to get 20-cent commons. And things like that, hysteria that kind of pushed the set's price up. Liliana, one of the versions of her, was included in Dominaria United. And, just in general, there were effects that made this set kind of, it increased the hype before it came out. And then it was like, well, it did just turn out to be another standard set. It wasn't terrible, wasn't great. And in the same vein, Brothers War kind of had the serialized cards that helped it out a little bit, that are very unique. I mean, thus far, it's the only set to have ever had serialized cards. And so you can end up in situations where the individual details of particular sets might very well swamp this sandwich effect. And I guess we should call it the sandwich effect. I like that. But I would think that the sandwich effect is real. It's probably present, but it's competing against a whole lot of other effects in the market. And you can imagine that ultimately every individual buyer has this long list of reasons to buy a product, to not buy a product, to buy certain amounts, to buy in certain time periods, to delay purchases or advance them. And the only pieces of data that we get out of all of those decisions of all of those individual buyers and all of their inputs are these few that we can steal off of TCG Player and plot up here. Things like cumulative sales and cumulative spend and daily boxes sold and the prices and things like that. And so it's as if we've lost a lot of information. And so all of those individual inputs that stimulated the buyers to purchase or not purchase and purchase certain amounts and purchase at certain time periods, all of that information is lost when it's finally just turned into a certain number of boxes bought at a certain price on a certain day. And so you could have situations where the sandwich effect may be more pronounced in the data and situations where it's less pronounced. But I would suspect that it's always present. It's just hard to tease it out. And this kind of goes to something else that you need to be aware of when you do data analysis like this. You can have a good theory and you can think, I wonder if dot dot dot, and you put your theory out there and you try to find a data set that you can back test it against like this. And even if it appears from the data set that you can't definitively prove the theory, it may still be an effect that impacts whatever system you're studying. And here our system is just sales of these products on TCG Player. And so like I've said, it could be that the sandwich theory is real. In fact, I think it probably is. I think it is a real effect. It would make sense that if you release sets too often with too small of a gap in between them, then something is going to suffer. And it's just that it may be difficult with the small amount of data that we have access to really prove it out and do that with the data. So maybe WotC has enough data at their high level, but keep in mind that basically they sell to distributors and they sell on Amazon. And so they don't have a ton more data. They have different types of data. And their granularity is also impacted because they may sell many pallets at a time to one distributor, but they don't really know where those pallets go afterwards, when they are sold, what prices they're sold at, whether they're getting opened or not. And so even WotC has poor visibility into these kind of things. So I think it's a good idea. It was a really good question. It's difficult to prove or disprove is the thing. And so sometimes in data analysis, you kind of shrug your shoulders and you say, yeah, it sounds reasonable, but I'm not sure if I can prove it or not. We can't be sure. So it was a good question, and I appreciate those kind of questions, and I like getting to share them with all the rest of you too. So let me know what you think. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Join me on Final Trade. Thanks a lot.